This morning we are going to be focusing on the Gilbert and Sullivan Society's current presentation of Iolanthe, or Iolanthe?
Aielli.
Iolanthe, 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 whatever. And it's a show that's going to be funny, and it's a guy with a wig and a guy with a big beefeater hat, and the lovely young lady. So what is this story about? Ralph MacPhail, who's the director.
Iolanthe is a fairy tale of sorts about Victorian fairies that are dealing with the fact that their beloved sister Iolanthe had been banished for the unspeakable crime of marrying a mortal. So she was banished to the bottom of a stream. And what these fairies don't realize is that before she was banished, she gave birth to a son named Strephon, who is an Arcadian shepherd. He is half a fairy. He's a fairy down to the waist, and below the waist he's mortal. Anyway, Strephon is in love with Phyllis, a local shepherdess. But it turns out that Phyllis has also been the target of love for the entire House of Peers and the Lord Chancellor himself. Well, into this sylvan glade comes...
You have completely lost me.
Really? Oh. Well, the nice thing is that it makes a lot of sense on stage. Because we're introduced to a sylvan glade with a bunch of beautiful fairies, and by the middle of Act 1, the entire stage is filled by the entire House of Lords in their ermine and silken capes.
They did know how to dress up.
They really did. And, of course, Gilbert made sure always that his professional people were dressed to the nines, but the irony is, of course, that they come into the woods, essentially, dressed as if they were going to tea at Buckingham Palace or to an investiture. And it is quite a marvelous entrance as they fill the stage with a wonderful chorus, perhaps the grandest of all male entrances, Loudly Let the Trumpet Bray. With that group, we meet two noblemen, Lord Mount Ararat. His name suggests something of his pedigree. And he sings in Act 2 a very satirical song about the House of Peers. And we have with us this morning Sam Johnson, who will sing that for us if you'd like to hear it.
I would like to hear it.
Okay.
He's a big guy.
He is a former pirate king, and last year he was our Sir Despard Murgatroyd. And this time he is Lord Mount Ararat.
When Britain really ruled the waves in good Queen Bess's time, the House of Peers made no pretense to intellectual eminence or scholarship sublime. Yet Britain won her proudest bays in good Queen Bess's glorious days. Yet Britain won her proudest bays in good Queen Bess's glorious days. When Wellington thrashed Bonaparte, as every child can tell, the House of Peers throughout the war did nothing in particular, and did it very well. Yet Britain set the world ablaze in good King George's glorious days. Yet Britain set the world ablaze in good King George's glorious days. And as the House of Peers withholds its legislative hand, and noble statesmen do not itch to interfere with matters which they do not understand, as bright will shine Great Britain's rays as in King George's glorious days, as bright will shine Great Britain's rays as in King George's glorious days.
And that was Sam Johnson as the Earl of Mount Ararat. What a title.
Yes.
And he was referring to Britain's glorious days and the defeat of Napoleon at Waterloo. And I have to say that today, the day that we're recording this, is June 18th, and it is the anniversary of the defeat of Napoleon at Waterloo. And hence all the Waterloo Bridge and everything else they've got over there in Britain celebrating that glorious victory. And the song was wonderful. Thank you, Sam. And you can see the production, Iolanthe, at the Gilbert and Sullivan Society's current location. It's
The Worley Barton Theater at Brentwood Christian School off North Lamar, just north of Breaker Lane.
Right. And you've got through this weekend to see the show.
Yes, there are 5 performances this weekend, including matinees on Saturday and Sunday.
Excellent. And for tickets, go to gilbertandsullivansociety.org or
gilbertsullivan.org.
Okay, so you shortened your name a little bit. And now we're going to hear from another character in the drama. This is Shelby Schisler. Schisler.
And Shelby was our Mad Margaret last year. This year, she's playing the eponymous fairy, Iolanthe. We asked Shelby here today to give some indication of the breadth of Sullivan's score, which is universally regarded as one of his loveliest ones. She is the banished fairy, and she ends up, because of the plot, having to plead for her son Strephon to the Lord Chancellor. We find out that the Lord Chancellor was indeed Iolanthe's husband before she was banished.
My goodness.
And thus Strephon's father. And I've often thought that this aria that Shelby's about to sing was infused with Sullivan's own sorrow, because during the composition of Iolanthe, his beloved mother died. And we always associate Gilbert and Sullivan with lots of happy lyrics, sometimes trippingly on the tongue, very fast patter, and so forth.
And we'll get one of those today.
We'll get one of those today. But Shelby is going to sing the aria in which she pleads for her son's life, of the Lord Chancellor, her husband.
My lord, a suppliant at your feet I kneel. Oh, listen to a mother's fond appeal. Hear me tonight, I come in urgent need. 'Tis for my son, young Strephon, that I plead. He loves, if in the bygone years thine eyes have ever shed, 'tis bitter unavailing tears for one untimely dead. If in the eventide of life sad thoughts of her arise, then let the memory of thy wife plead for my boy. He dies. He dies, if fondly laid aside in some odd cabinet. Memorials of thy long-dead bride lie dearly treasured yet. Then let her hallowed bridal dress her little dainty gloves, her willow flowers, her faded dress, plead for my boy. He loves.
Shelby Schisler as Iolanthe, and a very tragic song. Just very beautifully done, too. And this is all part of the production of the Gilbert and Sullivan Society's Iolanthe. It's at the Worley Barton Theater in North Austin, off of Lamar, and just north of Breaker Lane. And it's through this weekend, so you've got several chances to see it. And it'll be fully costumed and staged and sets and all that other stuff.
With a full orchestra in the pit, too.
Yep. And is Jeffrey Jones Regona still conducting?
He is indeed.
Okay, we'll see him there. And now we've got Anthony DiBianca.
Arthur DiBianca.
Arthur DiBianca, who is a wonderful Gilbert and Sullivan patter song singer. And he's been with us doing several different versions of the sort of patter song that he's going to do today. Tell us about this one.
Well, this one is universally regarded as probably the most challenging one in all of Gilbert and Sullivan. It runs 3 pages of single-space print in the printed libretto, and it tells the story of the Lord Chancellor, remember Iolanthe's husband, who has been robbed of his rest because of he's been so much in love with Phyllis, Phyllis being that shepherdess who's in love with his son. Well, he appears on stage, having tossed and turned and thrown himself out of bed, and explains to us just what in the world this nightmare that he's been enduring is all about. And just like most of our nightmares, it goes from pillar to post, and it really ranges all over the place. But it's truly a virtuoso piece in terms of not only Gilbert's words and images, but also on stage with the full orchestra. The orchestration for it is just lovely. We're so grateful to have with us today Jeanne Sasaki, who has been our rehearsal accompanist at the piano today. But the piano reduction can't do justice to Sullivan's original orchestration, which will, of course, be heard in all 5 performances this weekend.
All right.
But this is the famous Nightmare song, sung by the Lord Chancellor in Act 2.
When you're lying awake with a dismal headache and repose is tabooed by anxiety, I conceive you may use any language you choose to indulge in without impropriety. For your brain is on fire, the bedclothes conspire of usual slumber to plunder you. First your counterpane goes and uncovers your toes, and your sheet slips demurely from under you. Then the blanketing tickles, you feel like mixed pickles, so terribly sharp is the pricking. And you're hot and you're cross and you tumble and toss till there's nothing twixt you and the ticking. Then the bedclothes all creep to the ground in a heap, and you pick 'em all up in a tangle. Next your pillow resigns and politely declines to remain at its usual angle, where you get some repose in the form of a doze with hot eyeballs and head ever aching. But your slumbering teems with such horrible dreams that you'd very much better be waking. For you dream you are crossing the channel and tossing about in a steamer from Harwich, which is something between a large bathing machine and a very small second-class carriage. And you're giving a treat, penny ice and cold meat, to a party of friends and relations. They're a ravenous horde, and they all came on board at Sloane Square in South Kensington stations. And bound on that journey you find your attorney, who started that morning from Devon. He's a bit undersized, and you don't feel surprised when he tells you he's only 11. Well, you're driving like mad with this singular lad. By the by, the ship's now a 4-wheeler. And you're playing round games, and he calls you bad names when you tell him that ties pay the dealer. Well, this you can't stand, so you throw up your hand, and you find her as cold as an icicle. In your shirt and your socks, the black silk with gold clocks, crossing Salisbury Plain on a bicycle. And he and the crew are on bicycles too, which they've somehow or other invested in. And he's telling the tars all the particulars of a company he's interested in. It's a scheme of devices to get at no prices, all goods from cough mixtures to cables, which tickled the sailors by treating retailers as though they were all vegetables. You get a good spadesman to plant a small tradesman, first take off his boots with a boot tree, and his legs will take root and his fingers will shoot, and they'll blossom and bud like a fruit tree. From the green grows a tree, you get grapes and green pea, cauliflower, pineapple, and cranberries, while the pastry could plant cherry brandy will grant apple puffs at 3 corners and banberries. The shares are a penny, and ever so many are taken by Rothschild and Baring, and just as a few are allotted to you, you awake with a shudder despairing. You're a regular wreck with a crick in your neck, and no wonder you snore, for your head's on the floor, and you've needles and pins from your soles to your shins, and your flesh is a creep, for your left leg's asleep, and you've cramp in your toes, and a fly on your nose, and some fluff in your lung, and a feverish tongue, and a thirst that's intense in a general sense that you haven't been sleeping in clover. But the darkness is past, and it's daylight at last, and the night has been long, ditto, ditto, my song. And thank goodness they're both of them over.
Arthur DiBianca doing the Nightmare song from Gilbert and Sullivan's Iolanthe, and Jeanne Sasaki doing a marvelous job at the keyboard accompanying. And you can see this show through the 23rd this weekend, and it's at the Worley Barton Theater up on Lamar, just north of Breaker Lane. And Arthur, I just loved what you did with that song, and I always love what you do with whatever you're doing with Gilbert and Sullivan's Society, because he was born to do this, clearly.
He was indeed. He's really a master of these wonderful roles.
Right.
You know, in addition to the Sullivan's lovely music and his orchestration, and to the variety of musical numbers, there's so much humor in Iolanthe, too. Just nonsense, some of it, but some of it is rather trenchant political humor, such as that we heard in Sam's song earlier, but there are also a number of lines that sound like they could have been written last night.
Right.
In fact, we have not twitted with the libretto at all. It's all presented exactly. It was written in 1882.
And what it boils down to is that human nature just hasn't changed all that much in that 120 years or whatever it's been, 140 years, I guess, almost.
Just about.
Coming on to it. Okay, so check out Iolanthe. Go to the Gilbert and Sullivan Society. If you guys know, gilbertandsullivan.org.
GilbertSullivan.org.
Gilbert, no and even.
If and will take you to Houston, Gilbert and Sullivan Society.
Okay, gilbertsullivan.org.
Right.
Simple enough. Okay, and thanks to Ralph MacPhail for coming in and telling us all about it. And thanks to the wonderful cast. We had Sam Johnson and Shelby Schisler and Anthony DiBianca, and at the piano, Jeanne Sasaki, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much. We'll see you on stage.
Thank you, John.
And thanks to our wonderful engineer, Jake Perlman. And I'm John Aielli, your host on Eklektikos. Bye-bye.